Thank you very much, our dear panelists. So now it's time for us to discuss the conclusions and findings, and now it's also time for give room for our audience. I hope that you've been able to introduce yourself with Slido, and there is a possibility in Slido to pose questions, and then our panelists see them here, and I try to somehow moderate that everybody is not talking at the same time, and I really wish you to pose questions, because otherwise I am in a role to pose the questions, and that is something I think it's in terms of interaction. I think it's better that you are the ones who pose the questions for us, and also give your input in terms of policy and so forth. And it seems that there is already first questions. Is there one main impulse that would help us to improve the perception that creative careers should not be prioritized in policy frameworks? This is about creative careers, and I know that in VP3 particularly, and also in VP4 this has been addressed. So would you like to, Roberta, start with?
Yes, I'm not sure I understand completely the question. So there is a first part. Sorry.
Can you put still the question?
Yeah, so there is a first part. So there are one main impulse that would help us to improve the perception of creative careers. So what could we do to improve the perception of creative careers? But I'm not sure whether they are suggesting that they should or they should not be prioritized. So it's slightly, but I'm assuming they mean they should be prioritized. So in terms of the impulse to do so, I think the point is that connecting Work Package 3 and Work Package 5, creative careers are not just careers. You know, each of us want to have a career where we have the opportunity, the freedom to express ourselves, to make the change to the world that we want to see. So creatives do that all the time, and often they take self-sacrifice to be able to contribute to that social agenda or cultural agenda they have. While in a sort of way, each of us would like to have the opportunity to be creative, to have the ability to contribute and be fulfilled by what we do and how we contribute to society. So I think it's very much about revaluing creativity within our society, which the Cultural Development Index is doing in terms of saying there isn't one definition of creativity, there isn't one creative career you're in or out. Each of us has got the ability to value and embrace culture and creativity. If we do so, that improves our life and potentially the one of the people around us. So if we do so, then improving creative careers is not for policy just about giving better jobs to some people. That in a sort of way is an economic agenda, an industrial sector agenda. It is very much about how do you improve the life of your citizens so that creative practice, creative careers, creative opportunities within our society are open to everybody. There isn't a selection process where people are in or out or feel excluded, but they feel they are empowered to do so. And obviously within that then it's more about highlighting what aspect of it's almost about going back to more about what is work. And I feel that's something which is more of a broader debate. And in some countries, obviously, when you have the universal sort of basic income, that debate is being put forward. So what is it about work? Is it about just paying for our living, or is it about us expressing ourselves? So if it isn't any work should be about expressing ourselves, not just paying for our bills, then there is really an opportunity to think about what kind of protection, what kind of basic income, what kind of social security can we give everybody, so there is a fair distribution of those opportunities. And then with that, building on that fair distribution, how can then some people feel themselves empowered to be more creative or contribute in other ways to our society.
Thank you, Roberta. Would you like Ulla to continue also in terms of creative careers?
Yeah, thank you. So if I go back to the findings of the different values they pursue, if you think about the harmony value, the aim and their wish to offer us venues where we can come as we are and be given voice and feel empathy. If we think about the enjoyment value, where we are promised these new experiences of again feeling connected with one another, being offered opportunities to learn with others, to work with others. So I think these are important, and these have not been highlighted. So they have been perhaps clouded because a lot of when we read about the creative industries, for example, they open up with the sentence that they have a huge economic value. which is of course true, but we should not be limited to that, but we should understand the different values that they create that are important for us human beings, I'd say.
Okay, thank you. I wonder now. There is a new question. I'm sure we come back to these values, and I already somehow warned you, Alessandro, that making these values visible is something I want you to. You being an economist, I'd like to ask you a question about that. But let's go later to this, as there seem to be some questions over there in the Slido. First, how can the Urban Observatory in Lagila, yes, something which you highlighted, Alessandro, and similar initiatives contribute in supporting CCIs following the principles of sustainability and inclusiveness?
Yes, the observatory is a research center that produces systematically information and data that are not available. For instance, normally we refer at secondary data, while the observatory, such form of observatory, can produce primary data, tailoring and designing the research by looking at the necessity, for instance, of creative workers or CCIs and so on, and try to link such data with the issues of inclusivity and sustainability, because now we have no information and data on such categories. For instance, there is a theoretical framework of a new stream of research in cultural economics and not only in cultural economics, that linked the cultural participation to pro-environmental behavior. There is evidence, and I'm proud to be part of such research stream. There is evidence of the causal linkages between cultural participation and such human or agents' behavior. But such information are not available. We can try such information only thanks to the work of cultural observatories. At municipal level, these data are completely absent. So we can provide some information just to tailor policy intervention of such themes.
Okay, thank you.
That's my point.
Very informative. Okay, there seems to be a question targeted to Jonathan. Jonathan mentioned the 9 indicator groups as the CDI. Sorry if I missed that earlier, but what are they? Can you repeat?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Sheila.
Reputation is always, the core.
Absolutely.
As a teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Sheila. So the 9 indicators were shown briefly twice, once in the video in a big diamond, and then second in the presentation, presented like the UN's Human Development Index. And I'll run through them again. So they're divided into 3 groups. And the point here is that what cultural opportunity consists of is much broader than is conventionally understood. So the first group is about experiencing and connecting with others. So the opportunity to connect with nature is number 1. The opportunity to connect with other people is number 2. Number 3, connecting with ideas, possibilities, futures. So this is the space of cultural opportunity, and where do we get our ideas from? How do we experience the world? And then the second group is around enacting, developing those creative projects. And they are accessing and managing resources, acquiring and developing knowledge and skills, and then engaging in encounters and interactions, putting on events together. So that's another 3 indicators. And then finally, it's a group around evaluating opportunities to have your work recognized in the market through payment, but also opportunities to be recognized by the state as part of your citizenship, or opportunities, finally, to be recognized in your community, in the commons. So this is a broad range of types of opportunity, all of which our work suggests is the space of cultural opportunity, cultural capability that matters.
Okay, thank you. And we will not have an exam of this tomorrow, but anyhow, I'm sure we will get back to this, particularly when the reports on DISCE will get out in due course. Okay, but let us continue. Okay, another question. Can you kindly explain how close the Cultural Development Index is to being implemented internationally? So, Jonathan, I suppose this goes for you as well.
Sure. Thank you, Anonymous, for your question. So we're at the stage of proof of concept. So we mentioned that we have a creative opportunities survey. So we have been testing that survey in workshops in recent weeks. And we're in the process of testing the survey in 2 of our partner cities. So in the reports that we're publishing as part of DISCE over the coming months, we'll be presenting that proof of concept, and then the next steps will follow from there. So watch this space, and yeah, we'd love to hear what you think of it when you get the chance to see it.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really something new, I'm sure. Yes, please, Alessandro.
It's what when I call for a survey, no? Because such theoretical framework could go to the empirical level if we have data through surveys, as Jonathan just mentioned. That's
okay, but now let us move on. I figured out from both VP3's and 4's contribution that you refer to, Ulla mentioned, unsustainable creative deal, and I noticed that the same themes have got. Well, sure, we have the same data, so it was it would be quite surprising if there were totally conflicting interpretations. But anyhow, you both refer to low income, unpaid labor, and so forth. And this unsustainable creative deal, I think, is something which is quite core in terms of the inclusiveness and sustainability of the sector. So, can you elaborate a bit more? What can we do for it, and how we can challenge it? Who are the key actors, and what should be done? Well, I know this is a quite humble question, but could you elaborate a bit? If you, Roberta, start, perhaps Ulla could. Yeah.
Higher education. Maybe that you can take it. I think in terms of higher education policy, it's quite interesting to see how, in many cases, creative careers are always promoted as being directed to a specific kind of professional. So whether that's the musician performers, whether that's the visual artist exhibiting in a gallery. And actually, I think there is a bit of a hidden story around higher education, how those careers are promoted against the other careers which are looked down at. So whether that's the creative educator, whether that's the musician working in community workshop. So there is almost always an A list and a B list of opportunities in higher education. And actually, there's a lot of investment in trying to convince the students that they can get to be on that A list, which is often very short careers, very narrow opportunities that only a very small percentage of them will get to. And this is highly acknowledged by the students and the people we interviewed. However, the opportunity to bring creativity to a much larger sector of societies and activities, that is completely missed out on. So we talked with, for instance, organization working with community and music in Dundee, and what they clearly said is that they see so many graduates coming out of music degrees, and really what they want is somebody with a music degree, but somebody that can also feel like their agenda is to contribute to society, to work with people which are young and are excluded, to work with communities, to engage social work and social care as part of their music, not just performing music. So we can see that there is a lot of these other agendas that creative education should embrace and think about, but they're sort of forgotten most of the time. They're not valued enough. And so there is a little bit of a change of the value system as well in higher education that needs to happen. And this actually builds on other research that's been done in the UK in relation to fusion, and the fact that, for instance, in creative higher education, it's very hard for anybody to pursue a creative discipline alongside another discipline. So if when you finish your school, you have 2 A levels, and one is in a creative discipline and one is a scientific discipline, and you really, what you would want to do is going to university and keep working on both, you can't. You have to make your choice. And either you invest in creative, and then you have to really think about those careers and those objectives that you're going to have in the future, or either you think actually the science might be a safer route with better salaries, with better opportunities. There's no way in which you can bridge, and that's really a missed opportunities, because there is a lot of great talent that builds across those disciplines rather than necessarily needed to be narrowed down within one.
Okay, thanks. And Ulla, yes.
Yeah. So thank you. As we highlighted in the findings, there seems to be wish also within the sector to try to challenge this. So there were these individuals, organizations that sort of identified themselves as wanting to be the change makers, to change the rules of the game. And I think this is very important. There was, for example, recently a case in Finland where a major hotel chain announced a big competition for artists to bring in a mural with 5,000 euros all included. And that there was a big uproar over that that's not fair, that's not good. Well, what ended happening was that the competition was cancelled, which you may think that we went from bad to worse. But I hope that resulting from this is that the next time a company board comes together and decides let's bring in the artist, they don't put in 5,000 euros on the table, but 50,000 euros or 100,000 euros. So I think we need to call these up, these unjust practices, together jointly, raise questions around them and try to get a bigger deal. And this goes also for the individuals. Within DISCE we have used services of one creative entrepreneur. We have told them, please send an invoice. To this date, we haven't received the invoice. So send in the invoice, put in the 0 at the end. So I'm not saying this is only up to the individual. Of course not. But jointly, collectively, I think we can do things together.
It seems that it goes from the very bottom, from the very grassroots level, from the individuals up to the institutions, and every level there should sort of take this into consideration when trying to figure out ways to get rid of this unpaid labor and free cultural offerings and so forth. Not only a challenge for individuals, but all the levels, organizations and policymakers and even legislation in a way. Okay, but now I wish to go back to, I promised to, okay, let us see. Yes, there is a question from the top, I think. No, that we had, is this the one? Have you yet had any interest for governmental circles in looking at forms of value other than the economic? Yeah, well, yeah, actually, we come and now we take these very questions, the other values than economic values, which was also something I wanted to pose, Alessandro, to you. But let's start from this side. Oh, this goes a bit perhaps to Ulla. So have we had this kind of discussions yet? I suppose not so much at this point yet, but we are happy to have. Isn't it something like that, or can you colleagues also confirm what's the situation in your?
Yeah. Thus far, I don't think this has been emphasized enough. I think the economic value is always sort of taken up first when having these policy discussions. But I think it's very important that we bring in these other values and start debating over them as well. And as we have seen during the pandemic, for example, how much people have been suffering from the lack of connections, from the lack of sort of ability to have culture and be culturally active. So I think this is the moment where to cultivate this discussion further.
Jonathan.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we had a very interesting policy workshop a few weeks ago in which someone said what has so much potential in this cultural development index is the fact that it speaks across different policy domains. So which policymakers are interested in what kinds of value, and actually different domains of policy making might prioritize different kinds of value. And actually it's a question of bringing them together into the same conversation to recognize that creative economy generates these multiple forms of value, and how can they work together to generate those different kinds of value. So certainly some of the more kind of conventional spaces of cultural policy might be sensitive to non-economic value, but which decision makers are in the room, which types of policy makers are part of the conversation?
Yeah, I think that our project really demonstrates the fact how much different policymakers should to connect their policy making in terms of helping creative economies. But now, Alessandro, and actually I remember in informal discussions with Finnish governmental representative in creative in terms of creative economies and promoting them, how to promote them, we discussed about these different values, and it is sort of it is somehow identified, but the challenge is that it's hard to measure it. It's hard to really demonstrate the value of the other values. And now I look at you, Alessandro. What can we do about it so that we do not only talk about money and monetary values, but we might also talk about measure, not only talk, but measure, because measuring is something that policymakers are keen on doing. So measure this human flourishing, enjoyment, social value to which we refer to during this afternoon. So
if we start talking about value, we should set up a 3 days symposium on the topic. By the way, I can say two main things. One is which kind of value are you considering? For instance, you can measure the economic value, but also the use value. So the importance that you gave to, I'm going to say, a museum just because you use such museum. Or another type of value is option values, to preserve, to conserve such museum for the future generation. And this is linked to a sort of sustainability, no? The duration of culture. But what I want to stress is the point that normally when we talk about value, we link the value to economic measure. And we measure the direct impact of culture, of CCIs, by looking at GDP, workforce, job, and so on. I think that it could be really useful to shift the lens to the indirect effect, so we can value culture by looking at the positive externalities that produce cultural participation, for instance, on several dimensions, such environmental dimension, well-being, psychological dimension, and that's, I think, is a good point then to measure, for instance, cultural participation and the environmental behavior that is one of these dimensions. And this is relevant because if we talk about the multi-sectoral policies, multidimensional policies, here we can match several dimensional policies, environmental policies, for instance, with cultural policies to foster synergies between culture and other dimensions. That's my point. Of course, if the issues and the topic is so complex that the space, we have time constraint, so I stop here.
So thank you, Alessandro, thank you, Roberta, thank you, Ulla, thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Nick, over there on online in London. So it was really nice that we could see you and hear you as well. It seems that we have a good ground for us to continue with the policy roundtable. Now there is a possibility for us to have a short break. I know that we're all sitting quite long time and having laptop or screen in front of our nose. So it's now time to pick up a cup of coffee or go a beer pause or whatever somebody wishes, and we continue with the policy roundtable at 5:15, if I'm correct. So thank you, and with the policy.